Okay, so let's go through an inspector calls and focusing on Mrs. Birling. So first of all, let's just touch on kind of the role that Mrs. Birling has in the play. So obviously we know that Mrs. Birling is part of the older generation and she's part of the upper class. And significantly, Mrs. Birling is probably the character who changed the least. She is most stuck in her ways. And Priestley's using her to show kind of how hard it is sometimes to get these kind of outdated views to change and to challenge those views. Whereas the younger ones, of course, Eric and Sheila, they do change, they learn the lesson. So Mrs. Birling's kind of the opposite, if you like. And Priestley's really critical of her because Mrs. Birling sees herself as kind of superior, morally superior to the working class. So she, as we'll go through the quotes, she can't believe that a working class girl wouldn't steal money and that possibly her dear son Eric could be involved in such things. And so she tries to kind of distance herself and tries to justify her actions. Okay, so let's have a look at some quotes. So the first quote then was, "I was perfectly justified in advising my committee not to allow her claim." So, if we just break it down then, so this phrase perfectly justified. So, firstly, this adverb perfectly shows that she has absolutely no doubt whatsoever in her mind that she did the right thing. She's not willing to consider, even for a second, even for a moment, that what she might have done would be wrong. And she, as a member of the upper class, is kind of showing here how she's so out of touch with the lives of the working class. She can't consider that actually that Eva might be so desperate. And this phrase justified. So justified is repeated 3 or 4 times along with duty in Act Two, and she's trying to basically trying to get rid of any sort of blame or responsibility for her death. She sees it that she did the right thing and Eva wasn't a deserving case. Which of course is showing how selfish she is because the whole point of her charity was to help people like Eva. Um, and we see the power and the social status. This is quite interesting. So, Priestley wanted to start a welfare state. So, think about the NHS and the system we have today and the kind of help we have for people in need. Before that, it was down to committees, and people like Mrs. Birling, as a member of the upper class, would have tremendous power to influence those committees. And here it says, "I was perfectly justified in advising my committee not to allow her claim." So that phrase, "my," shows the influence that she had over the committee in order to kind of refuse her money. And she could have quite easily have said, use her position and status and power to provide money and help and support for Eva, but she chooses not to. So Priestley is showing how much power the upper class had over the working class. Okay, so we just go on to the next quote. "As if a girl of that sort would ever refuse money." So basically, what Priestley is doing here through Mrs. Birling is showing that she cannot believe for even a second that someone such as Eva, who's a working class girl, would ever refuse stolen money. And of course, we know that actually Eric's the one who steals money. So if we just go through the quote. So, "as if a girl," so she's deliberately using the word girl there rather than woman. She used the word girl, which is obviously a really kind of patronizing sort of thing to say. And it's almost like she's infantizing Eva. So she's treating her like a baby and showing a lack of respect for her. And the phrase "that sort," so it's really dismissive in the tone. "That sort," it's like she's not even human. Kind of, she's grouping all the lower class together. "Oh, well, they're probably all criminals. They probably just go around stealing things anyway. I'm not going to help a girl of that sort." Implying that if it was an upper class person that had come to ask for help, she would have, of course, helped. Um, and this idea, "ever refused money," so I kind of touched on earlier. The irony is that, well, there's two ironies, in fact. So one, that her job, if you like, is to run this charity commission, etc., and she is there to help people just like Eva who are in need, and of course she refuses to. So there's the kind of first irony that she doesn't do what she's meant to do, and then secondly, of course, we know actually Eric is the person who stole the money. And she's saying, well, these working class girls, they've got no morals, they've got no scruples, etc. An upper class person wouldn't do that. But of course, the irony is that Eva knew it was stolen money and she refuses to take it because she knows it's stolen, whereas Eric's obviously the person that stole the money in the first place. And then finally, this little exclamation mark at the end just shows that she's shocked by the idea, the very notion that a person like Eva would turn down money, and just used to emphasize the kind of strength of her feeling, if you like. Okay, so our last quote for Mrs. Birling then. So I don't suppose for a moment we can understand why the girl committed suicide, girls of that class. So a little bit similar to the previous one. Um, Mrs. Birling can't consider, even for a moment, okay, even that small amount of time that why a girl would commit suicide. So it shows you how out of touch she is from society and how deluded she is. Um, and this idea of here that the kind of pronoun we shows that the kind of upper class seems separate to the working class. She doesn't understand who they are. She's ignorant to the suffering of the working class. They almost seem quite alien to her. And if you think about it, if we watch the video for the inspector, he says we're all part of one body. And this idea that we all interconnected, whereas she's kind of showing how disconnected she is from the upper class, from the working class. And then finally, girls of that class again. So it's a really dismissive tone. She is, she admits she's prejudiced when she said, I was naturally prejudiced against the case. So she's kind of really dismissive of the fact that she wants money and she needs help. And Mrs. Birling just sees the kind of working class as a whole group. So she stereotypes the working class based on assumptions that it's turned out to be faulty. Okay, so hopefully that helps you with Mrs. Birling. Thank you very much.